Chapter 61, Marks of Possession. The sunlight streaked through my bedroom window as I blinked awake, my cheek pressed into the pillow. The first thing that greeted me wasn't peace or the leftover comfort of sleep. It was the faint ache along my neck. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face and trying to shake off the drowsiness. When I finally faced the mirror across the room, my breath caught. My reflection told a far more damning story than I'd expected. Bright, unmistakable, a trail of marks scattered over my neck like scattered petals. They were deep, vivid, the kind of marks that screamed claimed. I groaned and threw myself back onto the bed, covering my face with my hands. "Seriously, Roman?" I whispered to myself. The memories crashed back like waves refusing to retreat. Roman's ice-blue eyes, fierce and unyielding. His gripping hold on me, the drunken possessiveness that poured from every touch last night. "Run away again and I'll break both of your legs, little wolf." It was a threat, sweetened by the mix of fury and desperation in his voice. Roman, drunk or not, didn't make empty promises. My heart twisted just thinking about it. Those 3 months of escape, where I thought I could disappear, thought I could shake off his overprotective chains, felt like a distant memory now. Natalie had hidden me well, using her crescent wolf magic to cloak my scent. Roman searched everywhere. For 3 months, he was relentless. It wasn't until I resurfaced with my newfound strength that he finally cornered me. And yet, even with all the growth and power I'd gained during that time, facing him last night had reminded me of something crucial. Roman was still Roman, unyielding, powerful, and utterly incapable of letting me slip from his grasp. "Great," I mumbled, getting up and pointing an accusing glare at the reflection in the mirror. The marks glared right back. To make matters worse, my phone buzzed. Reluctantly, I picked it up, scanning the screen. Missed calls from strangers, but I knew exactly who was calling. Alexander. His persistence was becoming exhausting. Did he have nothing better to do? Rolling my eyes in frustration, I tossed the phone back onto the bed. I scanned my neck again, scowling at the purpling bruises that refused to be ignored. One hand reached absent-mindedly toward the top drawer of my dresser. Surely I had something that could cover all this? My hand brushed over a scarf and yanked it out. "Better than nothing," I muttered, hurriedly tying it around my neck. The moment I stepped into the living room, I froze. Roman's voice carried through the air like a blade cutting through silence. "I don't care about his intent," Roman growled. His back was turned to me as he stood rigid by the large window, the communicator in his hand. I crept closer, curiosity stirring inside me. "Desperation achieves nothing but mistakes," he continued sharply. His control was evident, his words calm, but dangerously so. Hunter's voice echoed faintly through the communicator. "Alexander's growing more insistent," he reported. "He's trying everything. Third-party mediators, diplomatic channels. He even reached out through lower-ranked alliances to mask his request. He's pressed for the mansion. He wants it for Grace's recovery." Grace's name made my hands ball into fists. Roman simply let out a soft, humorless laugh that chilled the room. "Grace needs it," Hunter added, hesitant. "He's not letting this go, Roman. He's burning resources just in the hope of a yes." "Good," Roman said flatly, his tone turning icier. "Let him burn through every resource they have. When desperation clouds reason, alliances fail. Perfect timing for Amber Pack's downfall." Hunter hesitated. "Should I make the rejection more formal this time?" Roman's response was immediate, his voice cutting like frost. "Don't waste too much effort. Deliver it cold and clear. No alliance. Nothing." He clenched his fist and then turned slightly, enough for me to catch the glint of determination in his sharp gaze. I stepped fully into the room, clearing my throat. Roman didn't turn, but his stance shifted slightly, acknowledging my presence. "Let's add some chaos to match the Winter Pack's current state," Roman said into the communicator, his voice grim and final. The call disconnected, and silence filled the space, at least until Roman finally spoke, his tone lighter now. "How long were you eavesdropping, little wolf?" My heart jumped at his words, and I took one cautious step forward. "Long enough," I shot back, folding my arms across my chest. He finally turned, his ice-blue eyes trailing over me. For a moment, his expression softened, but only briefly. His gaze stopped at my neck, or more specifically, the scarf tied awkwardly around it. "Scarlett." His voice curled low, soft but commanding. "Lose the scarf." I stiffened, clutching the fabric. "I don't have time for this. I'm heading to the healing center and—" He crossed the space between us before I could finish. His towering frame loomed as he leaned in slightly. "I wasn't suggesting," he said with quiet firmness. I gave him an exasperated look, pulling back and shaking my head. "Roman, please." His eyes narrowed slightly, his patience waning. Without warning, he swooped in and scooped me up entirely. "Roman, put me down!" I yelped, my hands instinctively pushing against the hard wall of muscle that was his chest. He ignored me entirely, carrying me straight to the kitchen. His grip was firm but gentle. When he set me down on the counter, I tried to wriggle free, but his hands found the edge of the scarf. In one smooth motion, he pulled it free. "Ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. His gaze roamed over the marks, his satisfaction evident in the smug twist of his lips. I swallowed hard, heat rushing to my cheeks. "Stop staring." He quirked a brow. "Does this bother you?" "Yes, more than I'd ever admit." I looked away, grabbing the nearest piece of toast and shoving it into my mouth to avoid answering. Roman's lips twitched with amusement as he leaned lazily against the counter. "Let me know if you need any help with your meal," he teased, his tone casual but carrying the same weight of authority he always wore. Thankfully, the tension broke when Aiden strutted through the door like he owned the place. "Morning," he greeted, his grin crooked as usual. His eyes zeroed in on me, his head tilting slightly. "Scarlett?" he started with a mischievous edge. "Why's your face so red?" "Shut up, Aiden," Roman interrupted, his voice laced with immediate disapproval. Aiden blinked, clearly startled by Roman's sharpness yet unwilling to back down too easily. "Geez, touchy," Aiden mumbled, though his smile didn't waver. He moved to sit in my seat, but Roman's voice cut through the air again. "Not there." Aiden stopped mid-move, straightening up and looking between Roman and me in confusion. "What? Why not?" he questioned, the faintest hint of defiance in his tone. Roman's piercing gaze locked onto him, his words slow and precise. "Because no one sits in her seat." The unspoken intensity in his words hung heavily. Aiden raised both hands in mock surrender, clearly trying to hide how rattled he was. All right. Didn't mean to step on any toes. Or seats, apparently," Aiden muttered, finding another chair on the far side of the table. The fact that Roman's presence completely dominated the room was obvious, even to him. I stared at Roman, my face flushed, though thankfully Aiden's arrival had provided enough of a distraction to pull focus away from me. But Roman wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He watched my every move like a predator, ensuring his prey wouldn't escape. It was possessive, intense, unrelenting. It was Roman, Chapter 62, Betrayed. I sat at the head of the long, dark table in the Shadow Organization's private meeting room. The dim lighting barely illuminated the expressions of the people seated before me, but it didn't matter. This wasn't a place for warmth or friendliness. This room served one purpose: control. Aiden Walsh sat across from me, looking less cheerful than normal. His usual playful air was absent, replaced by a sharp seriousness that fit the weight of the conversation. "The Winter Pack is getting desperate," Aiden began. His voice was measured, but the tension was clear. "Sarah Winter has been contacting everyone she can think of. She's offered access to sacred resources, rare herbs, and even ancestral documents." I arched a brow, tapping my fingers on the table. "How desperate are we talking, Aiden? Desperation comes in many forms." Aiden hesitated for just a second, then placed a folder onto the table and slid it toward me. "Desperate enough to promise things even they can't replace. They're practically begging at this point." I didn't bother opening the folder. I wasn't interested in details. I was interested in their suffering. "And what did you tell them?" I asked, my tone calm but laced with icy authority. Aiden cleared his throat, adjusting in his seat slightly. "I told them I'd need to consult the necessary authorities before committing to anything." My lips curved upward in a dark smile. "Good, all decisions go through Scarlett, no one else." He looked at me, his gaze steady but uncertain. "You want them to grovel to her. You want them to be fully at her mercy. They need to know what it feels like to be powerless, I said coldly. After everything they've done to her, this is deserved. Aiden frowned but didn't argue. Sarah doesn't seem to understand who she's dealing with. They still believe Scarlett is someone they can outmaneuver through negotiations. Then it's time to correct that miscalculation, I replied. Every time they look at Grace fading away, I want them to remember who holds what they need. I want them to know it was Scarlett they tossed aside, and Scarlett who now holds their fate. He leaned forward slightly, speaking lower, though the firmness returned to his tone. Scarlett won't agree to help, you know that as well as I do. Of course not, I said darkly, my voice dropping. I'm counting on it. Aiden swallowed, the weight of my words sinking in. He pinched the bridge of his nose briefly, a rare show of discomfort. Roman, this feels excessive. This isn't just their downfall. Their pack could crumble under this pressure. That will be their problem, I replied with cold finality. The room seemed to grow heavier, colder. Logan stirred beneath my skin, his power manifesting faint wisps of tension in the air. You have your instructions, I said, standing abruptly. Send Sarah a formal message. Make it clear that Scarlett oversees all decisions for Grace's treatment, and remind them. I paused briefly, leaning forward, allowing my ice-blue eyes to lock onto Aiden's. Remind them what happens when you betray your blood. Aiden nodded, though his unease lingered in the wrinkles forming on his forehead. Understood, Roman. I inclined my head slightly, signaling that the conversation was over, and walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard the quiet shuffle of Aiden gathering his things, but I paid it no mind. My thoughts were already ahead on what came next. Scarlett would never forgive them, and I would make sure she never had to. I gripped the message from Aiden Walsh tightly, rereading the lines over and over until they blurred. My vision swam with disbelief, tears burning unbidden at the edges of my eyes. All decisions regarding treatment must be approved by Scarlett Winters directly. The words felt like iron chains tightening around my throat. It wasn't enough that my daughter had severed ties with the Winter Pack. Now she was holding all the power we so desperately needed. This can't be real, I whispered to myself. My voice trembled, weak against the room's suffocating silence. I snatched my phone from the table, my fingers shaking as I dialed Alexander's number. He had to know something. He had to have an explanation. He picked up quickly. Mother, he said, his tone clipped and impatient. Why? I started sharply, my voice cracking with frustration. Why does Scarlett have this much power over Aiden Walsh, one of the most renowned healers in Europe, answering to her? How is this possible? There was a long pause. Alexander's sigh came through the line, heavy and resigned. Because she's not who you think she is anymore. He finally said, What is that supposed to mean? I snapped. My anger flared, temporarily pushing out the fear curling through my chest. She's connected, Mother, Alexander said flatly. More connected than anyone realizes, and she's no longer just some outcast healer. She's... He paused as if hesitating to say the words. I didn't care about his hesitation. What, Alexander? Speak plainly. She has protection, he finished slowly, deliberately. Powerful protection, and that's why no one touches her anymore. Before I could respond, Daniel stormed into the room, his expression frantic. Mother, he interrupted, his voice pitched with panic, Grace is getting worse. You need to come now. Before I could react, Grace's scream tore through the air, her agony rippling through the house and into my chest. Every instinct begged me to run to her, but the message in my hand rooted me in place. Alexander? I hissed urgently, my grip tightening on the phone. If Scarlett is so well protected, then explain to me how we're supposed to fix this. Fix Grace. Fix everything. He didn't answer. Alexander, answer me! But the line went dead. I stared blankly at the phone before letting it drop to the floor, joining the crumpled message in a heap. It felt like everything was slipping away. The afternoon sun was merciless, bearing down on me like the weight of Scarlett's rejection. I stood outside her healing center, waiting, my arms crossed over my chest as tension mounted. Mason snarled at the back of my mind, pacing wildly, His agitation bled into my own, pushing my patience further and further toward its breaking point. Scarlett finally emerged, stepping lightly out of a black SUV. The Shadow Organization's emblem gleamed on the door like a taunt, as if I needed another reminder of her alliance with someone stronger than me. But what struck me more were the marks on her neck. They were vivid, undeniable. She was marked. A surge of jealous rage roared through me, my wolf mason snapping viciously in response. "Scarlett!" I called sharply, striding directly into her path. My voice carried the weight of my barely contained fury. She paused, turning to face me with an expression of icy calm. Her green eyes flickered with irritation, made sharper by the sun's golden light. "Alexander," she replied coolly, "don't you have better things to do than play watchdog outside my center?" I didn't take the bait. I was too angry for games. "You betrayed our engagement," I snarled. Each word hit like a boulder rolling off my tongue. "You traded me for some mysterious alpha? Are you that desperate to—" Her claws moved faster than I could see. Burning, sharp pain blazed across my cheek as her nails pierced skin, leaving blood running down the side of my face. Mason howled in disbelief, surging up inside me, but Scarlett didn't even flinch. "Betrayed?" she repeated mockingly, her voice sharper than the fierce sting on my cheek. "How could I betray something that was never real? You gave up any claim to me the moment you chose Grace over me." "You're lying," I hissed, stepping closer as Mason growled possessively in my chest. "I would never have let you go." "Grace is irrelevant," Scarlett interrupted coldly, her voice cut like ice, her emerald eyes burning with fury. "You abandoned me for her. Remember that, Alexander." I clenched my fists, feeling Mason surge forward again. "You still haven't answered me. Who is he?" Her stare turned lethal. "I thought I made myself clear," she said, her tone low but dangerously calm. "Touch me again, interfere with my life again, and I'll do worse than break your arm." I froze, her words hitting deeper than her earlier strike. This was no idle threat. She meant every word. Chapter 63, Untouchable. Alexander completely disregarded my warning and barged into my treatment center. The doors to my treatment center flew open with a loud crash, startling both the staff and the patients. The air was thick with his overbearing arrogance and misplaced dominance. I rolled my eyes. He hadn't even bothered to hide his aggression. Of course, he wouldn't. He never did. Ignoring his disruptive entrance, I calmly continued reviewing the shipment records on my desk. The muted murmurs of the staff at the reception desk reached my ears, their unease palpable. "Scarlett!" Alexander's voice boomed across the hall, heavy with demand. With an exasperated sigh, I stood and made my way toward the main hall of the center. The moment I laid eyes on him, I knew he was spoiling for a fight. His amber eyes blazed, and his wolf mason practically radiated fury beneath his skin. "What an entrance," I drawled, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Using those doors like they owe you money?" Alexander scoffed, looking around the center with undisguised envy and bitterness. His gaze lingered on the rows of gleaming equipment, the perfectly organized shelves stocked with rare herbs, and the busy healers consulting with patients. He couldn't disguise his shock at the sheer scale and success of my facility. "This is," he began, but quickly shut his mouth, attempting to hide his awe. Instead, his lips twisted into a sneer. "You've really done all this? Alone?" I smirked and folded my arms across my chest. "Surprised that I don't need the Great Amber Pack's pity or resources to thrive, Alexander?" "You've built this," he noted, his tone thick with irritation. "But you're still reckless if you think this guarantees you protection. The Northern Alphas won't stand for—" "Spare me," I cut him off sharply, interrupting his growing tirade. I took a step toward him, my emerald eyes locking on to his angry amber ones. "This operation runs on supplies that your pack wouldn't even be able to afford. Your entire monthly budget wouldn't cover 1 week's worth of stock here." Alexander's jaw tightened. The truth stung. I could see the flames of his fury flickering more vividly now. "This has nothing to do with your healing center," he snapped, his voice trembling slightly. "Stop comparing yourself to Grace." That made me laugh, a low, cold laugh that made several staff members glance nervously in our direction. "Grace?" I repeated scornfully. Oh, you mean your chosen mate? The one whose condition worsens every single day while you stand here demanding I submit? Alexander flinched, but quickly snapped back. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and his wolf mason roared beneath the surface, fighting for control. Before I could say anything else, he suddenly raised his head, his eyes blazing with a new, unsettling determination. I'll claim you right here, right now. I'll mark you as mine, Scarlett. My breath caught, not from fear, but from sheer shock. His words came out so boldly, so desperately, that for a moment I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're joking, I said, my voice cold as ice. But one look at his face told me he wasn't. This wasn't a calculated move. This was a desperate, last-ditch attempt, and it was pathetic. You think this is what I've wanted all along? I hissed, stepping closer until I was only inches from him. I could see Mason pushing further to the surface, but he was no match for the thunder rolling through Cora beneath my skin. Alexander opened his mouth but shut it again, looking momentarily conflicted. Is this why you came here? I snapped. To claim me like some trophy, Alexander? Or did you have another motive? Something to do with Hazel and Aiden? At the mention of their names, his face faltered. There it was. The reminder of Grace tugged at him, and he stumbled over his response. He began, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. I need to know what it will take to have Hazel and Aiden help with Grace's condition. The sudden shift in tone felt dishonest. This was the same man who moments ago tried to claim me against my will. Now, he wanted to negotiate? I let my laugh echo again, cold and unforgiving. Ah, so now we're negotiating? Scarlett, enough games, he growled, though his voice lacked strength now. Frustration seeped into his words. Name your conditions. Conditions? I repeated slowly, letting the word roll off my tongue like venom. Don't you think it's a little late for that, Alexander? Wasn't it you who tried to keep me in line by cutting off my resources? Restricting my access to sacred pack grounds, threatening my livelihood? Alexander's face darkened, his pride clearly battered by my accurate recollection of his past pathetic attempts to control me. And now, I continued, stepping closer so our faces were nearly level, you think you can waltz in here and ask for assistance? What's your next move? Threaten to take down my healing center. My emerald eyes flashed dangerously. Because if that's the plan, let me save you the trouble. Alexander's throat bobbed as he worked to suppress his swelling anger. Mason clawed within him, but my wolf Cora loomed larger than his petty desperation. What do you want? He demanded abruptly, his voice cutting through the tension. Just tell me. Once again I laughed, a cold and humorless sound that sent a shudder through the space between us. I want complete independence, I said firmly. I want nothing from you. Or your pack. Grace is running out of time, Alexander finally admitted, his voice raw with desperation. I'll do whatever it takes. You want independence? Fine. I'll agree to it. Just give me Hazel and Aiden. You'll leave Grace? I asked, tilting my head mockingly. Throw away your chosen mate? What, to gain favor with me? His silence only fueled my disdain further. You're pathetic. The last word hung in the air like a thundercloud between us. I stepped back, letting him finally absorb the weight of reality. As long as you keep believing this is about me wanting your attention, I said coldly, you'll only keep proving your uselessness. Fast as he stormed out of the center, I muttered under my breath, some alpha you turned out to be. I threw my hands against the steering wheel of my SUV, knowing full well my anger accomplished nothing. Scarlett's words echoed in my head. Every snarling remark fueled the fire, burning hotter with each passing second. I slammed the car into gear and sped away from the healing center. Every moment replayed in my head like a cruel montage of failures. Useless, I muttered, mimicking her cutting tone through clenched teeth. I could barely contain the fury boiling over. Mason paced within me, silent now but smoldering, his energy crawling just beneath my skin like hot coals. The first thing I did was call Jason. It took only half a ring before he answered. Alpha? Came his cautious tone. She's gotten too arrogant, I spat, gripping the phone tightly. We're gonna ruin her. Tear that healing center down brick by brick. Jason hesitated, which only angered me more. What are you waiting for? I barked. We've tried. Jason admitted reluctantly. Alpha, I warned you before. She's untouchable now. I released a deep growl, vibrating with Mason's restless energy. She's just one wolf, I snapped. One healer. How has no one succeeded? It's not just her, Jason said carefully. The Shadow Organization's reach is vast. None of the northern packs are willing to align against her treatment center. They fear the retaliation your actions could provoke. I gripped the steering wheel harder with my good hand, the knuckles turning white. They should fear me more. Jason's voice remained measured, but it held an edge of warning. One of the allied packs even laughed openly at our influence, Alpha. They mocked the Amber Pack's attempts to oppose Scarlett. I punched the console of the car so hard I felt the echo through the quiet of the vehicle. How far had I fallen? Lesser packs dared defy us now? What are you saying? I asked, my voice low but heavy with barely contained fury. Jason's silence lingered for just a second too long. I'm saying, he began cautiously, Scarlett Winters and her healing center are untouchable, at least for now. Those words hit like a tidal wave, extinguishing the flames of my fury and leaving behind only an empty, bitter cold. Untouchable. My pride was in tatters, and I had only myself to blame. Chapter 64. Possessive Protection. Scarlett's POV. Through the wide window of my office, I caught sight of a car that could only belong to Alexander. The sleek, arrogant SUV he drove like it was a throne on wheels. It was parked right outside my healing center, black paint gleaming under the sun like it was mocking me. There he was, sitting inside, clutching the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding him together. Even from this distance, I could see the tension, his barely contained anger. I knew why he was here, Jason must have reported. By now, Alexander was undoubtedly choking on the revelation of just how powerful my healing center had become, how it operated without needing anything from the Amber Pack or him. He probably hated it. The truth was a bitter pill for someone like him. He always had to be in control. And now he wasn't. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Poor Alpha Alexander. The realization was probably hitting him like a ton of bricks. And what likely stung the most was his failure to identify my protector. Roman's shadow loomed invisibly over everything Alexander had been trying for. From here, I could see the muscles in his arm tighten as he gripped the wheel harder. His head dipped toward the dashboard. If I had to guess, he was trying to hold his rage in check. But we both knew how bad that temper of his could get. Let him stew, I thought. I had more important things to deal with. Sitting across from Emma at my favorite lunch spot, I could feel her gaze lingering on me before she even spoke. Usually her sharp tongue didn't need much warming up, so I braced myself. "All right, spill," she said abruptly, gesturing toward me with her fork. "What's with the scarf earlier? And more importantly, why is your neck looking like that now?" I froze mid-sip of my tea and then slowly lowered the cup. "What are you talking about?" I feigned ignorance, knowing full well what she meant. Emma arched an eyebrow, leaning forward. "Don't play dumb, Scarlett. We've known each other too long for that." She raised a hand and twirled a finger in mock circles around her own neck. "Those marks, care to explain, or do I have to guess?" "It's nothing," I quickly answered, hoping the conversation would die. "Training injury." "Training injury?" Emma echoed with an exaggerated laugh, so loud that the elderly couple at the next table turned to look at us. "Girl, I'm a healer in training, okay? You don't fool me. Those are not training-related." I shifted uncomfortably, trying to focus on my plate, but her persistence wasn't letting up. "Oh, don't you dare avoid this, Scarlett." She pointed her fork at me, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Who's the lucky guy? Come on." "No one," I replied firmly, though my tone betrayed me. "Nothing happened, Emma. Drop it." She leaned back with a sly grin. "Right, nothing happened, but someone left their mark, that's for sure, and judging by the flavor of those marks, it wasn't just playful." "Don't read into it," I mumbled, picking at my food. Emma sighed but dropped her teasing, for now. Still, I could see her mind turning, calculating. Thankfully, she shifted gears before I had to physically wrestle the topic away. "Fine, keep your secrets," Emma finally said, though her smirk lingered. "But something wild happened on my end, too. You won't believe the gossip I just overheard." Relieved by the subject change, I looked up. What is it now? Her playful demeanor shifted. Her expression grew serious. Daniel Winter, she said flatly. He's been poking into your supply chains, digging around. Apparently, Sarah sent him on this nice little mission to mess with your business. I coldly chuckled. Of course, Sarah would. The woman couldn't tolerate losing control of me, even after all these years. What's their angle this time? I asked, tone sharp. Emma frowned. I think they're trying to pressure your suppliers into dropping you. Maybe even threaten your connections behind the scenes. They're desperate. They've been desperate for a while, I said with a dismissive shrug. But the thing they keep forgetting is, I've prepared for this. Emma grinned. Oh, I know you've prepared, but it still ticks me off. She stabbed at her salad with unnecessary force. It's like they never learned their lesson. They don't, I replied, and they won't. She sighed and set her fork down. For the first time that day, she softened. Her voice lost its bite. Look, she started slowly. You're strong, Scarlett. No one would argue that. But don't carry all of this alone, okay? You've got people. She motioned to herself with both hands. Me. This is what I'm here for. Her sincerity caught me off guard. Emma wasn't usually one to focus on emotional confession, but her words hit me deep. I know, I said quietly, and it means more than you think. By the time lunch was over, I knew Roman's car would be waiting outside. Call it a gut feeling or just evidence of his meticulous timing. Either way, there it was, parked neatly at the curb. Emma nudged me with her elbow as we stepped out. Wow, look at that. Pickup service too, huh? He's really going all out. I rolled my eyes. Don't start, Emma. Oh, I'm starting, she shot back, clearly enjoying herself. Personal security, high-end cars? Does your brother have an application process? Because I could use this level of devotion in my life? Not everything is as perfect as it looks, I muttered, though she barely seemed to notice. Emma gave a dramatic sigh. Right. I'm sure it's all very complicated. She winked at me, still grinning. Enjoy your ride, Miss Untouchable. She vanished down the street before I could come up with a retort. I climbed into the car, ready to settle into the seat and pretend the last hour hadn't been dedicated to Emma's relentless teasing. But before I could even blink, Roman's hand reached out and pulled me off balance. No, I gasped softly, but it was too late. He pulled me directly onto his lap. Again, I stiffened, heat rushing through my entire body. The position was too intimate, too charged. I was sitting across him like I belonged there. Roman, I started, voice low and cautious. What are you? His ice-blue eyes met mine, sharp and vivid. There was no teasing in his expression now. Just focus. Intent. His hand reached up, brushing lightly against my neck. Goosebumps rippled across my skin as his thumb traced the undeniable marks he'd left. The ghost of a smirk tugged at his lips. Training injuries? He asked softly. His voice carried just enough disbelief to make my heart skip. For a moment, I was frozen. His tone, the way his hand lingered, the way his eyes bored into mine. It was overwhelming. I tried to recover, clearing my throat. Yes, I said quickly. Too quickly. Training injuries. Roman raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. Training leaves you bruised like this? His thumb pressed slightly, just enough to make his meaning clear. My face burned, and I could feel the embarrassment twisting in my stomach. Drop it, I muttered, looking away. But Roman didn't move. He didn't drop it. If anything, his focus sharpened. His expression softened just enough to be disarming. Little wolf, he said gently, his voice dipping, don't lie to me. I inhaled deeply, trying to find the will to push him away, but his hand slipped to my jaw, his touch gentle, and my strength faltered. Chapter 65. She has my full protection. Roman kissed me again. His lips moved with a hunger that I couldn't resist, commanding yet subtle, heated yet controlled. My hands rested on his chest, a steady barrier between us that grew weaker with every second his lips melded against mine. I could feel the steady thrum of his heart under my palms, syncing with the erratic beating of my own. Roman? I broke the kiss, my breath uneven, my voice trembling as I forced space between us. His icy blue eyes, so piercing and filled with unspoken promises, bore into mine. We need to keep some distance, I stammered. At least until the formal mating ritual. This feels. Improper? He finished with a sly tilt of his lips, stepping closer as his towering frame loomed over me. His fingers grazed my chin, lifting it so I couldn't avoid his gaze. There was a possessiveness in his eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. Yes, I whispered, my hands reflexively pressing against his chest to stop him from closing the distance again. It's how you raised me, remember? You always emphasized discipline, restraint, propriety. His laugh was low and rich, a sound that ignited something dangerous deep within me. Discipline? Restraint? Since when have you ever truly followed my teachings, little wolf? His smile deepened as I fumbled to formulate a response. The words caught in my throat. Did I always follow his teachings? No, not always. He tilted his head, a teasing edge in his voice. You, Scarlett Winters, obedient? He paused, leaning closer. Really now. The smirk he wore was maddening, but it was also devastatingly attractive. I felt heat rise to my face, and quickly turned away from him, creating distance between us as I crossed the room. That's not the point, I snapped, though my tone lacked the sharpness I intended. It's just, we're not supposed to. Not yet. He followed me, slow and deliberate. Fate doesn't care about supposed to, Scarlett, he said, voice soft but laced with authority. He stopped just behind me, his warmth surrounding me like an invisible tether. The moon goddess herself binds us, brother and sister by circumstance, mates by destiny. I froze, his words slicing through the air between us. I bit my lower lip, caught between guilt, confusion, and the undeniable pull I felt toward him. But, shh, he murmured, his finger brushing against the mark he had left on my neck. My breath hitched. You think too much. Suddenly a sharp mental buzz sliced through the moment, startling me. Roman stiffened, his ice-blue eyes narrowing as he tilted his head, clearly receiving a mind link. The brief shift in his expression from irritation to curiosity was enough to confirm the culprit. Hunter, he muttered, the name dropping from his lips like a curse. The connection pulled me in as well, and I immediately caught the desperate tone in Hunter's voice. Roman, Scarlett, Sarah Winter has made another request. My fists clenched reflexively. I already knew what he was about to say. Let me guess, I said coldly through the link. This is about Grace. Yes, Hunter confirmed hesitantly. Her condition is worsening. No, I interrupted firmly. A sharp, bitter edge filled my voice. The answer is no. Find someone else. There are plenty of healers in the Northern Territories. They can save their golden child without me. Hunter paused for a moment as if gauging how far he could push the subject. Scarlett, I understand your anger, but... It's not up for debate, I snapped. Grace's suffering isn't my burden to bear. I broke the connection hard, cutting Hunter off before he could respond. Roman's hand came to rest on my shoulder, squeezing gently. I turned to face him, searching for understanding in his expression. Am I? My voice faltered, but I forced myself to ask, am I being too heartless? His icy blue eyes softened slightly, though his words remained steady. Mercy isn't something you owe anyone, Scarlett, and I will never force it upon you. His reassurance settled something deep inside me, though I still felt lingering doubts. Memories of my upbringing in the Thorn Pack swirled in my mind, those brutal years after my when survival overshadowed everything. Roman had always taught me to value strength above all. Compassion was optional, but strength was necessity. After what they've done to you, he added, his voice dropping lower, colder, no one would blame you for turning your back on them. I nodded stiffly, more to myself than to him. He was right. Grace and Sarah were only reaping what they had sown. Later that night, back at the seaside mansion, I found myself once again in Roman's arms, though this time with far less resistance. He carried me inside effortlessly, ignoring my protests, just as he always had when I was a girl in the Thorn Pack. Roman, I exclaimed half-heartedly, squirming in his hold. I'm perfectly capable of walking, and I'm perfectly capable of carrying you, he shot back, his tone light yet commanding. It's faster this way. Behind us, Hunter trailed quietly, his expression a mix of resignation and relief. I could only assume that our apparent reconciliation had calmed whatever tension he was feeling. Once inside, Roman set me down gently, his hand brushing against my waist for just a moment longer than necessary. I looked up at him, ready to protest again, but his gaze softened me instantly. "You should rest," he said, his voice firm but kind. "Hunter and I have business to handle." I nodded without argument this time, surprisingly content to follow his instruction. The earlier doubts that lingered in my mind had been temporarily pushed aside. Roman's unwavering presence had that effect on me, grounding me in a way nothing else ever could. Seated in my study, I found it difficult to concentrate. Hunter's voice droned on, detailing threats, strategies, and intelligence, but my mind kept drifting back to Scarlett. Through our mate bond, I could feel her peaceful rest, which both comforted and distracted me. "Roman?" Hunter murmured, pulling my attention back to him. He placed a stack of reports on the desk. "You're not listening." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers as I met his concerned gaze. "Something important?" "Yes," he answered stiffly. "Nathan Blake may not be directly involved, but we've uncovered ties between Grace's biological father and Lucas Gray's rogue pack." The name sent a spark of rage through me. My wolf, Logan, stirred beneath my skin, flooding me with a surge of latent energy and protective fury. "Lucas," I said slowly, my voice low and controlled. "He dares interfere?" "It seems so," Hunter confirmed, "though we haven't yet pinpointed his exact plans. What's certain is that Grace's condition has indirectly created an opportunity for him." My ice-blue eyes burned with feral intensity as I processed this news. Logan growled restlessly within me, his instincts pushing me to strike preemptively, to crush any potential threats to Scarlett. "Scarlett doesn't need interference," I said finally, my tone sharp and decisive. "Let her handle the winter pack as she sees fit." Hunter looked hesitant. "Sir, with Alexander growing more unstable?" "She has my full protection," I interrupted coldly. "Alexander, Lucas, Nathan, none of them have the power to harm her now." Hunter nodded, his unease gradually fading. He placed the final report on my desk before stepping back to await further instructions. Chapter 66, A Mother's Desperation. Roman kissed me softly on the forehead before leaving for his study to handle business. The slight touch lingered as I rested on the bed, the warmth of his presence wrapped around me like a fragile but protective shield. I shut my eyes for a brief moment, hoping to clear my head and avoid the constant whirlwind of thoughts. The day had been exhausting. Alexander's unwelcome aggression, Emma's keen observations, and Roman's unwavering possessiveness danced in my mind like an unwanted storm. For the first time in days, I felt somewhat at peace. But that peace shattered. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my temporary calm. I sat up with a frown, picking it up from the nightstand. Claire's name glared at me from the screen. "Claire?" I answered, already sensing the trouble. "Scarlett, thank goodness," she began hurriedly, her voice tight with stress. "Listen, we have an issue at the center. 2 different shipments arrived at once, but half the items from the Eastern Territories weren't labeled properly, and the newer staff, they're overwhelmed." I could practically hear the chaos in the background of the call. Shouting, people scrambling, and the faint, steady hum of frustration. "What?" I groaned. "Didn't we already set protocols for this sort of thing?" "We did, but they're panicking," Claire admitted with a sigh. "This is a mess, Scarlett. We could really use your input right now." "I trained them better than this," I snapped, my frustration pouring out. "I know," Claire replied, guilt clear in her tone. "But—" "I'll call back in an hour," I said sharply, cutting her off. "Sit the team down, calm them, and remind them of the protocol. I'll sort it out if it's still unresolved." The call ended, but my phone buzzed again before I could take another breath. This time, the number was unknown. I knew better than to pick up unwanted calls, but something told me I wasn't going to get peace until I did. "What now?" I demanded as I answered. The voice on the other end was weak and trembling. "Scarlett, it's me," came the soft yet strained tone of none other than Sarah Winter. I froze, my anger flaring instantly. Of all the people I wanted to hear from, Sarah Winter sat at the bottom of the list, buried deep under layers of bitterness. I nearly ended the call right then, but curiosity, laced with a hint of irritation, made me pause. "What do you want?" My tone was icy, cutting through like a blade. "Please, just hear me out," she pleaded, her voice carrying desperation. It's about Grace. She's not improving. Aiden said the silver poisoning is worsening. Scarlett, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't. No. My answer was immediate and uncompromising. Scarlett, please, she begged. She doesn't have much time left. My chest tightened for a fraction of a second as her frantic tone squeezed through. Then it quickly dissolved, replaced by the familiar bitterness that surged whenever I thought of her. You think I care? I replied coldly. You think Grace's suffering means anything to me after everything she's done? Her voice cracked as she tried to formulate a response. I know I failed you, she whispered, guilt heavy in her words. I didn't raise you how I should have, but I still... You still what? I snapped, cutting her off. Loved me? Acted like I was your daughter? Oh wait, no. That was Grace, your precious, perfect Grace. My words dripped with venom as years of pain and anger clawed their way out. Her weak protests only fueled my rage. Do you even remember the first time Grace orchestrated my near death? I demanded. She set rogues on me, Sarah. Rogues. I was barely a teenager, and I came back bleeding, half-conscious. And do you know what you did? My voice grew louder, angrier as the memories flooded back. You punished me. You didn't even ask what happened. Grace told you her lies, and you ate them up like the blind fool you were. That's not true, isn't it? I spat. Even when Grace admitted the truth, you did nothing. Nothing but blame me. Somehow it was my fault. Always my fault. Sarah's breathing grew uneven as my accusations crashed down on her like a relentless tide. I believed her because, she stammered, struggling to defend herself, because I didn't know any better. Then why didn't you know better the second time? Or the third? My emerald eyes burned with fury, even though she couldn't see them. Do you think I forgot, Sarah? Do you think those scars healed? I admit it, she said weakly through another sob. I didn't know how to handle things back then. I wasn't strong enough to manage both of you. Grace needed more care. It was like a fire exploded in my head. Grace needed more care? I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief and anger. She was a parasite, Sarah. She used you, manipulated you, and dragged me through hell every chance she got. The only difference is, now the silver poisoning is catching up to her, and you want me to fix it. It's not for me, Sarah choked out. It's for her. She's dying, Scarlett. I know I failed you, but don't punish her for my... I'm done with this conversation, I growled, cutting her off yet again. Grace made her choices, and you made yours. I owe you both nothing. Scarlett, please, she cried, her voice breaking completely. I just want to make this right. Make it right? I repeated bitterly. You're a few decades too late for that, Sarah. Without giving her another chance to reply, I pressed the end button, my hand nearly shaking with rage. Every nerve in my body buzzed as I stared at the blank screen. The room felt suffocating as memories I'd long buried screamed to the surface. I barely noticed the soft knock against my door until it pushed open. Roman stepped inside, his piercing ice-blue gaze immediately locking onto me. As always, his presence was commanding, but this time his expression held concern. He took one look at me, and I could tell he knew something was wrong. Who was it? He asked, his voice calm but firm. I rubbed at my temples, not wanting to relive the conversation. Sarah? His expression darkened instantly, his shoulders tensing. What did she want? To beg for Grace, of course. My smirk was humorless as I stared out the window. What else? Roman crossed the space between us and placed a hand on my shoulder. His warmth was steady, grounding me in a way nothing else could. Do I need to deal with it? He asked quietly, but there was no mistaking the lethal edge in his offer. No, I said quickly, forcing a deep breath. It's nothing I can't handle. It's just her voice, her words. They get under my skin. He nodded slowly, his gaze softening despite the tension he carried. I have to go into town for a bit, he said, almost reluctantly. But I'll be back for dinner. He paused, leaning down just slightly. Relax, Scarlett. You're stronger than her. Don't let her drag you down. I nodded, swallowing back the knot in my throat. I won't. When he left, the room felt both calmer and emptier. His words lingered, settling the turmoil in my chest as I straightened my shoulders. Sarah wouldn't win. Not now. Later, as I was shuffling through paperwork, my phone buzzed again. Emma's name flashed across the screen this time. "Emma?" I answered, relieved to hear a friendly voice. "You're gonna love this one," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Guess who I ran into today?" "I don't have time for guessing games," I muttered. "Just tell me." "Sarah Winter," Emma replied, and immediately my interest piqued. She was outside Grace's room at the Amber Pack's medical facility, and, you'll love this, she wasn't alone. "Who else?" I asked, already guessing. "Alexander," Emma said with a laugh. They looked defeated, like the world finally decided to hand them a taste of what they've given. I leaned back in my chair, letting the satisfaction wash over me. "Really?" "Yep," Emma confirmed, "and if I had to guess, Grace's condition is probably what's breaking them. She didn't look well." "Good," I said simply, a cold smile tugging at my lips. Emma hesitated for a moment, then added softly, "They've run out of strategies, Scarlett. Their desperation shows on their faces." "I figured as much," I replied coolly. "And still I feel nothing." Emma hummed approvingly. "Good, because they don't deserve your pity." Chapter 67, Desperate Measures. Grace lay in the sterile hospital bed, her frail form almost swallowed by the stark whiteness of the sheets. Her once vibrant beauty was now a shadow of itself, her skin stretched painfully tight over her bones. The silver poisoning racked her body, faint metallic streaks snaking under her translucent skin. Every so often, a low groan of pain escaped her lips, sending another dagger of helplessness through my chest. I sat hunched in a chair beside her, unable to look away. My hand twitched, clenching and unclenching, as if there might somehow be something I could do to fix this. But there wasn't. I was left with nothing but the sight of my mate burning alive in her own skin, tormented from the inside out. And, no matter how hard I tried to bury them, Scarlett's emerald eyes and cruelly mocking words haunted me. She was untouchable. Her power loomed large, casting me in shadow. But that wasn't the worst part. I had nothing to offer Grace, not comfort, not healing, and certainly not the answers she so desperately needed. "Alexander." Sarah's trembling voice startled me, pulling me back to the present. I turned slightly, noticing her pacing the length of the room like a trapped animal. Her usually composed face was drawn, her hands wringing together as though they could physically twist the situation into a solution. She stopped suddenly, her panicked gaze locking onto mine. "You have to do something," she said, her voice cracking. She stepped closer, her desperation thick in the air. "Aiden Walsh, Hazel. Someone! You have to convince her." I didn't react. "Alexander," she said sharply, her tone rising with frustration. "Scarlett will listen to you. She has to. There's still something between you two, isn't there? Something you can use?" My jaw tightened at her words. Scarlett had made her feelings abundantly clear, and whatever bond we once had was long shattered. The humiliation of our engagement's failure burned beneath my skin. "Scarlett doesn't listen to anyone, Mother," I said finally, my voice low, bitter. I gestured toward Grace, lying still except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. "And she definitely won't bend for this." "You can't give up," Sarah snapped, her frustration clear. She whirled around, pacing again, her steps erratic and uneven. "You're alpha of the Amber Pack. You're supposed to lead, to make things happen. How are you just sitting here while Grace, your mate, is suffering like this?" Her words hit like jagged stones, but they failed to provoke the reaction she clearly wanted. Instead, I dropped my elbows onto my knees, running a hand roughly through my hair. "What do you expect me to do?" I spat, more at myself than her. Roman Thorn made it very clear what would happen if I tried to approach Scarlett again. "Do you think I've forgotten how he broke my arm?" I flexed my injured limb instinctively. The dull ache was a constant reminder of my powerlessness. "This isn't about you or your pride, Alexander," Sarah hissed, stepping closer. Her pale blue eyes were sharp, cutting into me with the weight of her emotions. "This is about saving Grace. Don't let my daughter die because you were too angry to push past your failures." Her words left a bitter taste in my mouth. Failures. That's exactly what this all felt like. A long chain of failures tightening around my throat. The weak groan from the bed made Sarah's shoulders stiffen. She turned her head quickly, her concern for Grace overriding her anger with me. I stood abruptly, unable to sit in the suffocating weight of the room any longer. "I need air," I muttered, my voice cold and strained. Without waiting for a response, I strode toward the door, my boots thudding heavily against the polished floor. I didn't glance back. The hall outside the treatment room was dimly lit, the silence stretching endlessly. I leaned back against the wall, letting out a slow, shaky breath. What could I do? Every avenue we tried led back to Scarlett, and Scarlett's heart had hardened beyond reason. Mason growled low in the back of my mind, restless. His usually powerful presence now felt uncomfortable, itching for action, though we both knew there was nothing to be done. "We're failing her," Mason snarled. His resentment matched my own, but his words churned my gut. I didn't respond, closing my eyes and forcing long breaths. I needed to think, needed to focus. Grace's face, her pleading blue eyes, her trembling hands kept flashing through my mind. But then, through the heavy cocoon of silence, a voice drifted through the gap in the door to Grace's room. Her voice. "You can't threaten me like this." I froze, my head tilting toward the slightly ajar door. My senses sharpened instantly, Mason's ears pricked in wary attention. Thomas Ward. The name jolted through me, a name I hadn't heard in years, spoken in that sharp, venom-coated tone that Grace adopted when cornered. I stepped quietly closer to the door, my footsteps deliberate and soft. Thomas Ward. His story was one of desperate tragedy, his pup suffering from poisoning, his hatred simmering for years at the injustices of life. But what did he have to do with Grace? "I told you, I'm in no position to help you." Grace snapped, her voice laced with a mixture of anger and panic. She sounded like a cornered animal, baring her teeth, but trembling all the same. "I barely have resources for myself," she added shortly, her tone wavering slightly. "So no, I can't help your brat." My lips pressed into a tense line as her words landed like a slap in the face. "Your brat?" My frown deepened. This wasn't the Grace I thought I knew. The voice on the other side of the call was muffled, but brief intervals of sound filtered through the door. Grace's responses, however, were loud, heated. "If I go down, you'll face consequences too," Grace hissed. There was fear in her voice now, trembling just beneath the surface of her attempts at dominance. I leaned against the doorframe, tension coiling through me like a taut rope. This conversation was beginning to feel heavier with implications I didn't fully understand. "I warned you before not to contact me again," Grace bit out, her voice sharp but more brittle now. "You're not the only one who can make threats." A cold realization began piecing itself together in my mind. Grace's silver poisoning. Thomas Ward. Poisoned pups. And now, these warnings, this blackmail. My chest tightened as thoughts spiraled faster than I could catch them. What had Grace done? I took another step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. If she noticed my presence, she didn't show it. "Figure it out yourself, Thomas," she spat suddenly. Her voice hit a shaky high pitch. "I don't have time for this. There was a pause, though the anger in her tone felt palpable. "If I go down, you'll regret it. Mark my words." Her words didn't just carry malice, they carried fear, that naked kind of panic that clung to every syllable. Grace was hiding something. Then, as if sensing the iron cage closing around her, Grace's head snapped toward the door. Through the thin window, her pale face turned to stone as our eyes locked. My spine stiffened, but I didn't flinch away. Mason bristled within me, his growl echoing in my chest. Grace blinked once, quickly masking whatever storm had risen just moments before. Her hand moved swiftly, pressing the button on her phone to end the call. As I leaned back against the wall outside the room, my thoughts churned violently. The Grace I had fought to save, the Grace I had fought for, time after time. The Grace who now shared her secrets not with me, her supposed mate, but with someone like Thomas Ward. And what she was hiding, it could change everything. For the first time, I wasn't entirely sure who Grace really was. Chapter 68, Desperate Schemes. The buzzing of my phone reverberated in the quiet room, even after I hastily ended the call with Thomas. I pressed the screen down onto the bedside table, trying to quell the shiver that ran through me. My fingers trembled slightly, a sign of how deeply his threats rattled me. My heart raced. Thomas was growing bolder, more restless. Before I could properly steel myself, a deep voice from the doorway sent a fresh jolt through me. Prison? My head snapped up. Alexander stood there, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed and his amber eyes sharp, scrutinizing every detail of my reaction. His tone wasn't loud, but the suspicion it carried threatened to chip away at my fragile composure. How long had he been standing there? My stomach clenched. "Oh," I blurted quickly, forcing a small, shaky laugh. It's nothing, really." I waved my hand dismissively, even as my body betrayed me with a slight tremor. "Just some mischievous wolf spreading rumors. I told him I'd bring in the authorities if he didn't stop." Alexander didn't say anything at first. His gaze didn't waver, pinning me down like a hawk studying prey. The silence stretched painfully long, and the pressure bore down on me. My pulse thudded loudly in my ears. I bit the inside of my cheek, trying to channel my fear into the persistent pain simmering from the poison. "Really?" Alexander said finally, his voice calm, but his expression hard. "That's all it was?" I nodded weakly, letting my shoulders slump as if in exhaustion. "Yes, just a little misunderstanding." His eyes narrowed slightly at my avoidance, making my skin crawl. He didn't believe me. Not entirely. I could see it in the tight set of his jaw, in the way his gaze flicked toward the phone on the table. "I don't like when people lie to me, Grace," he said, his voice dropping lower. The warning in his words sent a cold chill down my spine. I swallowed thickly, my throat dry. My hands instinctively curled around the blanket, and with a soft, pitiful whimper, I let my body sag further into the bed. Every movement was deliberate. "I know," I murmured, my voice cracking slightly. My eyes burned as I tried to summon tears, not that it was hard. My body, frail and racked with pain, made the act of looking pitiful all too easy. "I didn't mean to worry you, Alexander. I didn't want to add to your burden." His brows furrowed at the word burden. The edges of his anger dulled just slightly, just enough for me to press further. I played on his guilt, on his protective instincts that had always been my shield against his wrath. "I've let you down, haven't I?" I continued, my voice soft and trembling. Slowly, I dropped my gaze to my lap, my hands twisting nervously in the cover. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to handle it without bothering you, but—" "Stop," Alexander cut in abruptly, raising a hand. My breath hitched. For a moment I thought I'd gone too far. But then he let out a heavy sigh, rubbing a hand down his face in frustration. His shoulders slumped slightly as he sat down beside the bed, the weight of his presence making the mattress dip. "Grace," he muttered, glancing back toward me. His tone softened just enough to drive away the worst of my panic. "You know you don't have to deal with anything alone. If someone is bothering you, you tell me. You don't get to keep secrets, not from me." "I won't," I whispered, nodding quickly, as if my agreement could cement his trust again. "I promise." He studied me for another long moment, but the edge in his gaze had dulled. He didn't trust me entirely, that much was clear, but he cared too much to push further. For now, his doubts were buried beneath his concern for my well-being. I leaned back weakly against the pillows, letting out a small sigh. My body still ached from head to toe, and every movement felt like dragging heavy chains. But I couldn't focus on the poison now. I had to direct the conversation, keep his mind occupied with something else. "Alexander," I began hesitantly, my voice light and careful, almost as if speaking too loudly would shatter the room's fragile calm. He tilted his head toward me, his sharp amber eyes locking onto my face. "Yes," he prompted, his tone guarded. I hesitated, letting my hand drift to my temple as I pretended to gather the energy I barely had. I was wondering, would it be possible for me to leave here soon?" "Leave?" he repeated, frowning. I nodded slowly, careful to show just the right amount of hesitation. "It's just the smell of all these herbs. It's suffocating sometimes, and the healers." My voice trailed off purposefully, as though saying more would take effort I didn't have. Alexander frowned deeply, glancing around the room. I knew what he was thinking, how much effort and time had gone into ensuring this space was as comfortable and private as possible. But I also knew he'd misunderstand my words as dissatisfaction rather than manipulation. "You need the best healing environment possible," he said flatly. "Yes, I know. I murmured softly. "And I truly appreciate everything you've done for me, Alexander. But I can't help thinking that maybe the seaside mansion you're trying to acquire would be better suited. It'd be private, quiet, the air would be fresher there." He stiffened slightly at my words. My heartbeat quickened as his expression darkened. His gaze flicked away from me, but his jaw was tight, his posture rigid. "I'm still working on it," he muttered, his tone clipped. My chest tightened, though not from the poison this time. What was taking so long? I had depended on his promised success, leaned on it as a lifeline for my survival in the pack. Without that mansion, where would I stand? But I hesitated, reaching out to timidly touch his hand. His gaze snapped back toward me, and I quickly pulled my hand back as though retreating from a flame. "I mean, couldn't we move forward with it? I feel like it would make such a difference. The seaside view alone would—" "Grace," he interrupted sharply, his eyes narrowing. "I told you. I'm working on it." The edge in his tone stung, but I nodded obediently, lowering my gaze and shrinking back into the bed. "I understand." I bit my lip, trying to muster more sympathy from him. Alexander wasn't an easy man to handle when he felt cornered, but I knew how to shift the winds in my favor if I could just keep him focused on Scarlett. "Alexander," I began again, my voice trembling slightly with feigned hesitation. "Do you think I could see Scarlett?" The silence that followed was icy and immediate. His amber eyes darkened, his glare sharp enough to pierce stone. "And why?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Would you want to do that?" My hands fidgeted nervously against the blanket, though I tried to keep my expression innocent and timid. I feel like there's been a misunderstanding about everything, especially at that territory council meeting," I added carefully, watching his reaction. His glare didn't ease entirely, but his posture shifted slightly. He folded his arms across his chest, leaning back in his chair as his gaze bore into mine. "Misunderstanding?" he repeated, skepticism clear in his tone. "Yes," I said, nodding weakly. I adjusted my position on the bed, wincing as though the effort strained me. "I think perhaps she misunderstood my intentions, and Daniel's actions might have made everything worse." Alexander's eyes narrowed, his suspicion written all over his face. "And you think apologizing will fix things?" "I just want to clear the air," I said with a small, fragile smile, "for the pack's sake." His silence spoke volumes. His jaw worked, clenching and unclenching as he thought. "She won't meet with you," he said finally, shaking his head. "Maybe not," I conceded meekly. "But I have to try, for the good of the pack." Alexander scoffed, though his rigid posture softened slightly. His protectiveness toward me was still intact, even if shadowed by his doubts. The moment Alexander stepped out of the room, my breath rushed out in a shaky gasp. My hands pressed against my pounding chest as I tried to center myself. The plan was hanging by a thread, and I knew it. Alexander was only moments away from piecing together that something was horribly wrong. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. I reached for it shakily, my stomach flipping at the name on the screen. "Time's running out. My child's dying. Pay up, or I'll expose everything," read the message from Thomas Ward. My hands tightened around the phone, my knuckles white. I could feel the walls closing in. Thomas wasn't bluffing anymore. He was desperate. Desperation made him volatile, and that made him deadly. Tucking the phone beneath the pillow, I tried to summon some sense of calm. But the lingering presence of Alexander's suspicion weighed heavily on my mind. If he found out about my role in Scarlett's attack, if he connected the dots between Thomas and me, I would lose everything, including his protection. Chapter 69, Deadly Confrontations. My phone buzzed on the desk, the sharp vibration breaking the quiet of my office. Looking at the screen, I saw Alexander's name glaring at me, his impatience practically oozing through the display. I sighed, picking it up with reluctant fingers, already bracing myself for another self-righteous demand. "Scarlett!" His voice came through, rough and desperate. It wasn't his usual tone, and it made me pause. "You need to come." I frowned, my annoyance tempered only slightly by his unusual urgency. "And why would I do that, Alexander? I don't recall owing you anything anymore." "Grace," he said hurriedly. "Her condition is worsening. It's bad." "So?" That single word, drenched in indifference, hung in the air for a long moment. "Please," he finally blurted out, his arrogance shattered, leaving only the panic of someone who was out of options. "Just come to the healing den. She might—" His voice cracked. "I think she might not make it." Something twisted in my chest, though I couldn't quite name it. Pity? No, I didn't pity Grace. Curiosity, then. Why was he calling me of all people? "Fine," I finally replied, my voice sharp. "But if this is another attempt to guilt me into something, Alexander, you won't like how it ends." I ended the call without waiting for his response, already pulling on my jacket. My phone buzzed almost immediately again, this time with Roman's name. "Where are you going?" His deep, even voice filled the line, a mix of command and concern. "Alexander called," I said bluntly, grabbing my keys. "Grace is apparently on the edge of death. He wants me to come to the healing den." Silence met me on the other end for a long moment. "Are you seriously going to entertain that? It's a waste of your time." "I know," I replied with a sigh, "but call it curiosity. I won't be long." "You shouldn't go," he said firmly, his icy tone hinting at the lingering anger he always felt toward the Amber Pack. "At least let Hunter go with you." "No." I was already walking toward the door. "I can handle this, Roman. Don't worry." Another beat of silence, his disapproval practically crackling through the line. "Fine," he finally said, "but call me the moment something feels off." I promised him, knowing full well he'd likely follow up later regardless. As soon as I slid into my car, Emma's name popped up on my screen. I groaned and answered, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I started the engine. "What?" "You're going to love this," she said with excitement. "I found the rarest batch of healing crystals today. Seriously, this is groundbreaking." "Not now," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "I'm in the middle of something. We'll talk later, okay?" "Oh, okay," she replied hesitantly. "Be careful, Scarlett." Her concern made me soften for a moment, but I quickly refocused. When I reached the entrance of my healing center, Alexander was already pacing outside by his SUV. His arms were crossed, his jaw set tight, and his obvious frustration made me smirk. I slowed my steps deliberately, just to watch his annoyance grow. "You're late," he snapped the moment I was within earshot, his amber eyes flashing with barely contained irritation. I raised an eyebrow, unbothered. "You're lucky I came at all." His lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing more, clearly knowing better than to push me. Without another word, we climbed into his sleek black SUV, silence enveloping us as he drove toward the healing den. The weight of unspoken tension settled between us, suffocating in its intensity. I could feel the way his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every passing moment, his knuckles white against the strain. The healing den reeked of desperation. Aromas of herbal baths and burning sage tried futilely to mask the heavy aura of impending death. Grace lay on the central healing stones, her once ethereal beauty now a horrifying reflection of decay. Silver poison coursed visibly beneath her translucent skin, the dark, branching lines pulsing like living veins of death. Alexander stood awkwardly, his composure cracking under the crushing weight of helplessness. I kept my stride slow, my expression deliberately unreadable as I approached the center of the room. Grace turned her head weakly toward Alexander, her pale blue eyes shimmering with a desperate plea. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Leave us. I want to talk to her alone." Alexander hesitated, his gaze darting between her pitiful form and my cold, unyielding stance. I could see the memory of our last confrontation flaring in his amber eyes, his doubt warring with his desire to protect her. "Alexander," she murmured again, her voice laced with just enough vulnerability to break his resolve. With a reluctant nod, he turned and left, the door clicking softly behind him. For a long moment, silence enveloped the room, broken only by the faint, labored wheeze of Grace's breathing. I stayed standing, crossing my arms and casting a dispassionate gaze over her frail figure. "So?" she finally rasped, forcing a weak smile. "Are you enjoying your new empire?" I tilted my head slightly, my emerald eyes narrowing. "Define enjoying." Her smile widened faintly, though the effort made her face tremble. "Your freedom," she whispered. "It must feel exhilarating, After all, you're the big, powerful Scarlett Winters now, aren't you?" My silence only seemed to amuse her more. "Alexander told me about your little healing center," she continued after a pause, her tone dripping with mock admiration. "Impressive? Truly." I raised an eyebrow, my voice cold. "Glad you think so." Her own pale blue eyes glinted with something smug. Despite the weakness overtaking her body, that same old arrogance refused to die. But tell me," she pressed, her voice gaining a faint edge of malice, "does it fill that void in your life? Do you miss being part of a real pack?" I smirked, tilting my head ever so slightly. "You mean the packs that abandoned me? The ones that lied, schemed, and tried to strip me of everything? Or do you mean the one whose future Luna is currently trying to manipulate me?" Her laughter came in soft, brittle bursts. It was the kind of laugh that wasn't meant to bring joy, but rather fuel disdain. "You're still angry. I can feel it." I said nothing, letting the silence between us crackle like an unspoken warning. She shifted slightly, her trembling body barely able to lean forward. "You think you've won," she murmured, "but you're wrong." I let out a short, dry laugh. "Do enlighten me, Grace. What exactly am I missing?" "Alexander," she said plainly, her lips curling faintly. "He's working harder than you think. You might think you've outmaneuvered him, but he's already targeting your precious center. He's cutting off your resources, little by little." My expression didn't change, though my fists clenched subtly behind my crossed arms. Her words were meant to rattle me, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. "Is that so?" I said, my voice calm. "And how long do you think it will take? A month? A year?" Her blue eyes sparkled faintly, but her smile didn't quite reach them. "Not long," she whispered. "You've built something impressive, Scarlett, I'll admit that. But without the support of the packs, you'll crumble. You'll lose everything." "And yet here I am," I replied evenly, not missing a beat, still standing. "Meanwhile, you're—" I gestured vaguely to her frail form, letting the implication hang in the air. Her frail smile wavered for a moment, but didn't break completely. She pressed on, trying to reclaim what little dominance she had left. "You could leave," she suggested softly. "It would save you the trouble. Start fresh somewhere else. You'd be happy, Scarlett, away from all this chaos." Ah, there it was, the k in her mask, the unspoken desperation hiding beneath every smug word. I took a step closer, slowly, deliberately. My emerald eyes burned into hers, unflinching. "And why?" I asked softly, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Are you so eager for me to leave?" Her smile faltered completely this time. A flicker of panic flashed across her gaunt features, so fleeting it was almost imperceptible. Chapter 70, Accusations and Revelations. Grace's entire body trembled like a rattling leaf, her pale lips quivering as she spoke through ragged breaths. Her silver-streaked veins pulsed grotesquely beneath her skin, and her usual haughty expression had been replaced with one of sheer exhaustion. Yet, even on death's door, she somehow managed to summon her old arrogance. "Scarlett," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you feel it? The power you've gained? Does it satisfy you?" I crossed my arms. "Get to the point, Grace. I don't have all day to listen to your pathetic attempts at making conversation." Her lips trembled downward, as if I'd struck her, but her pale blue eyes burned with a fleeting spark of defiance. You shouldn't have stayed, Scarlett. You should have left the Northern Territories when you had the chance." I smirked coldly. "Why?" "So you can continue pulling strings behind the scenes? So you can keep hiding every dirty secret you've buried?" "You don't understand," she snapped, though her voice cracked pitifully. She winced, clutching her aching ribs, but forced the words out. "You don't know the enemies you've made. Dangerous ones. Wolves who will shred you apart the moment you slip up." "Spare me the warnings, Grace," I said with a roll of my eyes. "You're not scaring me, and you're certainly not convincing me to leave. If you're hoping for pity, let me assure you, you'll die waiting for it." She coughed violently, her frail body seizing as she struggled to catch her breath. Fresh, silver-tinged sweat dripped from her temples, but she managed to glare at me through the haze of her suffering. "You think this is a game," she whispered coldly. "You build your little empire, treat this like some challenge to overcome. But Sarah, Daniel, Even Alexander. They won't let you win." My lips curled into a cruel smile. "Let me win? You're foolish if you think I need their permission for anything." I leaned forward slightly, narrowing my emerald eyes. "And as for you, Grace, let me make one thing clear. I'm not going anywhere. Not now, and certainly not because of empty threats from someone who's too weak to even stand." That seemed to strike a nerve. Her face twisted with anger, but it quickly dissolved as she broke into another coughing fit. For a moment, I thought I might have pushed her too far. Her body began to jerk violently, her pale hands clutching at the edges of the bed. A strangled noise bubbled up from her throat, broken and sharp. "Dramatic as always," I muttered, shaking my head as I turned to leave. But then, something caught my eye. Her body convulsed, arching unnaturally as the silver streaks beneath her skin pulsed and spread faster than before. Her mouth opened, but instead of words, a horrifying gurgling sound escaped. A streak of blood trickled down her lips, stark against her pale complexion. For a fleeting second, I stood frozen. Was this another ploy? Another calculated performance to elicit sympathy? Grace was clever, but this looked too real. The crash of the door swinging open jolted me back into reality. "Grace!" Alexander's shout was raw, his voice thick with desperation as he rushed into the room. His amber eyes widened in panic as he took in her state. "What's happening?" I stepped back, letting him have his moment. "Grace, no, stay with me," he begged, his trembling hands gripping her shoulders in an attempt to steady her. Sarah barreled into the room next, a horrified scream tearing from her throat. "My baby," she wailed, rushing to Grace's side. Her shaking hands fluttered helplessly over her daughter's convulsing form. "What's happening to her? Someone help her!" The room descended into chaos as medical staff poured in, shouting commands and trying to maneuver Alexander and Sarah out of the way. Monitors began to beep urgently, the sound sharp and grating as the situation grew more frantic. "She needs stabilization. Move her to the emergency chamber now," one of the doctors ordered sharply. Two nurses rushed forward with a stretcher, carefully lifting Grace from the bed. Alexander hesitated, torn between clinging to her and letting the professionals do their job. "Alexander," one of the nurses said firmly, "you need to step aside." Reluctantly, he let them take her. His hands hovered uselessly in the air before falling to his sides. "I'll come with you," he said, his voice trembling as he trailed after them. As they disappeared through the door, Sarah spun on me like a feral animal, her grief twisted into fury, her pale blue eyes blazing with hatred. "This is your fault," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this to her. You're the reason she's in this state." "Are you serious right now?" I asked, arching an eyebrow. "Grace's condition is because of her own reckless choices. I didn't force her to lie, cheat, or poison herself with whatever deals she's made." "Don't you dare try to deflect," Sarah snarled, stepping closer. Her once pristine composure was completely broken, her face wild with anger, the anger of a mother who needed someone to blame. "You pushed her. You came here and provoked her deliberately. You wanted this to happen." "I confronted her with the truth, Sarah," I said coldly. "If that's what you call provoking, then so be it. But don't try to pin her mistakes on me." "You're a monster," she screeched. "Daniel, get her out of here. Call the council. Call the enforcers. She has to pay for this." Daniel appeared in the doorway, his expression torn as his gaze flicked between his furious mother and my calm stance. "Daniel, now?" Sarah barked, her voice cracked under the weight of her desperation. For a moment he hesitated. I could see the doubt flickering in his eyes, doubt about this entire situation. But then, as if the pressure was too much, he finally reached for his phone. "Fine," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "I'll call the council." I rolled my eyes, unfazed by the theatrics unfolding around me. Let them call whoever they wanted. Roman's protection had already rendered their threats meaningless. Sarah glared at me as Daniel made the call, her lips curling into a snarl. "You'll regret ever crossing my family, Scarlett. Mark my words." I met her gaze with a smirk, tilting my head slightly. "Let me know how that works out for you." The Winter Pack's judgment chamber was as cold and unwelcoming as its name suggested. The towering walls seemed to press down on me, and the circle of council members surrounding me radiated disapproval. They sat stiff and rigid in their chairs, their eyes boring into me as they muttered amongst themselves. Though I couldn't make out their exact words, it wasn't hard to guess. They thought I was guilty. They thought I was responsible for Grace's condition. Miss Winters, one of the senior council members, finally spoke, his voice deep and authoritative. You have been formally accused of provoking and accelerating Grace Winters' condition. If these accusations prove true, the consequences will be severe. I crossed my legs casually, leaning back in my chair. And? The councilman frowned at my dismissive tone. And we require your cooperation. Refusing to answer these accusations will not. I'm not refusing, I interjected, my voice calm but firm. I'm simply waiting. Waiting, he repeated, his tone skeptical. I nodded. For my partner to arrive. He'll clear this up soon enough. The council exchanged uneasy glances. A younger member leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he addressed me. Miss Winters, do you understand the gravity of this situation? This chamber represents... Oh, I understand perfectly, I said with a mocking smile. This chamber represents the laws of the Northern Territories. How impressive. But let me remind you. I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a deadly whisper. The Northern Territories have their limits. The Shadow Organization does not. The room fell into a heavy silence. My words hung in the air like a storm about to break, and for a moment, even the council seemed unsure of how to proceed. But before anyone could respond, a loud crash shattered the tense stillness. The massive double doors of the chamber swung open with a deafening force, the metal hinges groaning under the strain. Instantaneously, the room was filled with a suffocating aura, the kind of power that demanded submission.